Hey guys, today we're going to make some Chinese dumplings. These were dumplings that I was introduced to when we lived in Shanghai for a year and a half. And it's a Shanghai style big dumpling. It's pretty big, but it's not the soup dumpling. So most people associate Shanghai dumplings with soup dumplings, which is a completely different dumpling. First off, I have some baby bok choy. I'm just going to blanch these off. It's going to go into the filling.
How does baby bok choy differ from regular bok choy?
So they're actually not related. I think it's a misnomer. It looks like the bok choy we're used to here. I actually would need to double check that, but it's not related to the full-size bok choy that you see here. I think they just think it looks similar enough and they call it baby bok choy. Same thing happens with sushi, with a lot of fish that they don't know, or rather they don't know how to market it, so they just call it some form of tuna, even though it's not tuna.
Right, so like escalar?
Right, like super white tuna.
You think maybe a bigger pot would have been better?
Not really. I actually want the stems to cook more than I do the leaves. I could have done a bigger pot, but actually I don't need to soften the leaves as much as I do the stems.
So in terms of diameter, what size dumpling is considered large?
I would say the diameter is probably, I mean, it's kind of like a ravioli, or not a ravioli, but it's probably inch and a half.
Okay. This is just regular water, no salt?
No salt.
Do you rinse everything before you blanch it, or do you consider the blanching your rinsing?
For these, I did rinse a little bit. They tend to be quite dirty. They tend to have a lot of dust inside of them, a lot of soil. You can still see some on there. We'll trim away some of that later. And then I'm not using this water for anything else too, because it's going to pick up quite a bit of that soil. So got the smallest one here. It's good to go.
Ooh, are you shocking them in an ice bath?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. That helps stop the cooking, right? Mm-hmm. Retain the color?
Yeah, that part doesn't really matter for our application since it's just going inside the dumpling.
That's the most boring, shocking thing I've ever seen.
Okay, so we have our ground pork here. Go for the fatty one. So all I could find at the store was 80-20, 80% lean, 20% fat. If you want, you can even go to 70-30, but I just didn't see it. I also have a little ginger here.
So you don't have to use a knife to peel garlic?
No, you can use a spoon. You could also use a peeler.
Any particular tips for buying ginger? What do you look for? 等一下.
So I didn't have a very good selection at HEB, just where we were today. But normally they should feel firm. Like anytime the ginger, if you can press it and it starts, you can push into it. It's not good. Obvious things, just look at, whether there's any mold. Usually there are some that are going to have some mold already. You can trim it away. It doesn't matter too much. It's really, I think ginger is quite antimicrobial, so it's hard to go wrong. All the ones at the store did seem a little older, so they're just going to be a little tougher, and that's not going to matter too much for what we're doing today.
How long can you keep ginger?
It depends. You could put it in a container with a slightly damp paper towel. Put that in your fridge. Could probably last a couple of weeks.
So if someone doesn't have a microplane, can they just chop it up pretty finely?
You could, not so much for what I'm doing with the dumpling. You could chop it up finely and throw it into the dumpling, but I'm actually just using the juice.
Oh.
You could probably go to the store, buy one of those pure 100% ginger shots. And that would work too. That's just ginger juice. So one of those little immunity boosting shots. So it's actually quite fine. You can go into it with that, or if you want to, you could grab it and then just when you pinch, all the juice comes out.
Nice, like juicing a lemon.
And then we won't have any of that pulp.
Mm.
Okay, next up, I'm gonna have to chop the baby bok choy. We have the rest of our seasonings here. We have salt, MSG, rice wine, which you can also just use sake. I just pick up one of these large guys that you can actually drink as well from Chinatown or a Japanese supermarket. That way you just know it's higher quality. I think sometimes people are a little worried about the super cheap rice wine that you see. This one, at least, you know, it's good enough to drink, and it's still pretty cheap. And then some water. So we're actually going to emulsify a little water into our ground pork just to make the dumplings really juicy when they're fully cooked. All right, nice and cold. I'm gonna squeeze as much of the moisture out of here as possible.
Can you move that big bowl for me?
What do you mean?
It's in the shot of the cutting board. So you're not in the anti-MSG camp?
Nope.
You're in the pro-MSG camp?
Yep. Some would argue anti-MSG is racist. It was created based off anecdotes that had no scientific finding by people who complained that Chinese food made them feel sick. I don't believe there's ever been any proof that MSG has any kind of ill effect. It's really no different than salt. They are very, very similar.
Where'd you get this knife from?
This knife I got from a Daiso, either in Seattle or Vancouver.
Can you explain what a daiso is?
So a daiso is a Japanese $2 store. So kind of like a dollar store, but everything's approximately $2. And, you know, they just have a lot of interesting things, fun things. I bought this knife because I was working at a sushi restaurant, and it's a specific style of knife designed to roll out things like cucumbers, or like when I made spiralized zucchini noodles. And I couldn't afford to buy a proper one, so $2 one it was. I would say I am a knife fanatic, but not a knife snob. So if the knife works well, I'm going to keep using it. This one sharpens really easily, takes on a good edge.
What size are you looking for when you're cutting?
For this?
Yeah.
Pretty small.
Pretty small.
We're mincing it.
What's the difference between a mince and a dice?
A dice is more precise. A mince, you're kind of just going at it.
I see you're kind of going in a wave pattern.
You know, I've never really analyzed it. I kind of just look at places where I've kind of missed, and then I go for it. Try to vary the angle of approach here and there.
You always want to keep the tip of the knife on the cutting board, right?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. If you had two knives, you could chop like that. But I'm not a huge fan of this method because you can see it goes everywhere.
Right, it's just messy. We already have a child to do that for us.
There is the other method where instead of your arm like this, you hold it out like this. And it can be very fast, but it's also quite tiring.
Yeah. Makes for a good show, though.
Well, the double knife makes for a good show.
That's true. Someone else can clean up the mess afterwards.
Okay, so I think this is okay. It doesn't have to be super tiny. Chinese dumplings are kind of rustic anyhow.
It's a nice bright green color. I like that.
So in most dumplings, the amount of vegetable is about 50-50. It's about... So the amount of veg to pork is about 50-50. We'll go in with our salt, MSG, as well as the rice wine.
You're not squeezing very hard, right?
No. I'm just trying to combine them. Now I kind of just use my fingertips like whisks. And with our water, I'll go in with about a third of it.
The water doesn't make the filling watery?
It makes it very juicy since a pork dumpling is going to be fully cooked. And just a warning on that, you'll see it later. Well, actually, you probably won't see it, but if you make the filling a day or two or even 3 in advance, it has a good amount of salt content. In that time period, it almost cures a little bit. And what that does is it potentially locks in that color. So even when you cook it well done, it could still look pink.
Right. So sometimes when we bite into a bun or a pot sticker, it looks a little pink and you question whether it's cooked, but you know it's cooked.
Right. I mean, usually these have been timed so that it's going to be super well done. Cooking at home, if you're really not sure and you're a little worried when you cut into it or bite into it, in theory, you could test with a thermometer. It's a little small, so it's a little harder to test, but you could. So I measured out all my ingredients today, but if you were just freestyling this, which you certainly can, and I have before, you would want to get a little bit of your filling, and you want to see if the seasoning is good on it. And to do that, you can either just drop a little into some simmering water, or you could make a really, really thin patty, cook it in a pan, but you should definitely cook it. Cook it and then try it. Don't just try it raw.
So instead of water, could you use oil or fat instead?
So if your pork is too lean, I would add some lard. I would add some pork fat. It should be a little fatty, but the mouthfeel of just fat versus moisture from water is very different. It's fat is going to feel heavier. You want to balance in the dumpling of fat and moisture. And when we work the pork like this, it really allows it to hold on to moisture. So you can see it's nicely, the water is holding in there. There have been times where I've seen this go wrong. Sometimes it's just adding all your water at once. Sometimes, you gotta look at your pork. Maybe if it was previously frozen, it doesn't work. It's really bad when it doesn't work, because after you do this, you just see a pool of water starting to come to the top. I think it's also possible if you're baby bok choy or any vegetable, Napa cabbage, whatever you're using, maybe if you didn't blanch it and dry it, the amount of water in there is less controlled, and it keeps leaching out because of the salt. And so after you've mixed it and it's perfect, moisture starts coming out of those vegetables. And then I think that can also cause it to have a layer of water on top. And once at that point, as you're trying to get rid of the water, you're going to have really, really dry and dense dumplings. But these, I mean, it's so shiny. There's no water escaping. This is going to be super light, super moist. All right, so at this point, we're just going to let this go into the fridge, cover it with plastic wrap. We're going to let it chill for about an hour. You can let it chill overnight if you want to, but that just helps it to firm up a little. And then it'll make making dumplings more easier. All right, see you in a bit. All right, guys. So our filling has refrigerated. It actually went overnight because when I went to test yesterday's, I used these ones that I got from H-E-B, and they didn't work. So went out today, bought as many as I could that looked like they would work. So I have this one from a Japanese supermarket, these two from a Chinese supermarket, and they do say that they are Shanghai style. So I guess I'll just tell you, I tried all of them. This one works the best. I'll make one of each first, just so you can see the differences. We also tried the filling. It tasted a little bland. I added a little more salt and actually a little bit of chicken powder as well.
Can you show them what the chicken powder container looks like?
Sure. So that one that I used is a Chinese brand. It's LKK.
Chicken bouillon powder. Yep. Got it.
I added just little. It's quite common in Chinese cuisine to add chicken powder, either in place of or sometimes in addition to MSG. Okay, so here's the H-E-B one. The issue I had yesterday was it just kept tearing. This last one I'm going to do has been my favorite so far. It's from the Japanese supermarket. It just feels very pliable. It's more moist. Has a little extra flexibility. As far as making dumplings go, I don't know that I ever became super proficient. But they're passable. They're okay. It does take a while though. And when you're making well over 100 at a time, it's just starts to become something you dread.
Sometimes I would see in China that they would use an implement like a rod or a chopstick to help them fold with speed.
Yeah, and also, especially when they make the small dumplings, which are really, really small, they have something that looks just like a little stick. And they'll get it, smear it on, and then close it up very quickly. That was something I've never tried making. It looked very interesting, but it wasn't my favorite to eat. Mm-hmm. It had so little filling. So definitely just working with it. This wrapper, if you can find it, is the clear winner.
Let's see, what's the name of it? Mincing wonton wrappers, product of USA. Here are the ingredients. Does contain wheat, so not gluten-free.
So again, after you fold it in half, just make sure you wet the corner that you're going to end up folding over onto so that it sticks. And if you're ever finding that water is not sealing your wontons, your dumplings, you can also use egg white, or you can use a whole egg whisked up, even add a little water if you need it to be a little thinner. Here I'm just using water, so make sure we get all that air out.
How many dumplings do you think you'd comfortably eat in a sitting?
If they're this size, probably 15 to 20.
And are they traditionally served in a broth or are they steamed?
So traditionally, they're served about 3 styles. There's boiled, and then just served with a dipping sauce. Or they also do it in soup. It tends to be a very, very quick soup. Not one that involved cooking any bones or anything. It tends to be literally like salt, chicken powder, pork fat, some dried seaweed, maybe omelet strips, green onions, and then they just pour the hot water that they're cooking the dumplings with over into that bowl, and that's your soup. And it actually tastes pretty good for something that's just all instant, basically. So I have a few here. I'm going to cook it off first. This will be my first batch. So got water here, and
it's not really a rolling boil.
No, it can be, but we're actually going to moderate how much the water boils by adding more water throughout the process.
And it's this color because you tested a few prior, right? So it's not.
Yes.
It's normal water.
Yep. So I'm going to wash my hands since as we make these, I think it's fairly safe to assume we're going to end up touching some of the raw pork filling. Don't want to get trichinosis or anything, even though I don't think there's really been a case in forever, but I'm sure you can still get sick from eating raw pork.
I think you got pretty close to 20 seconds.
Okay.
The CDC would approve.
All right, so this is going. I'm going to get some more water in here from the fridge. So we can also set a timer. So I guess the question is, how long? I'll set an 8-minute timer. The general rule is if your dumplings are fresh, as they are here, and they're this size, they're larger, you would drop it in, and usually it's a much bigger amount than what I put in, so it alters it as well. But that drops the temperature of your water. You keep it on high. The moment you see it boiling again, as it's about to right now, you add a cup, 2 cups of water. So you can see we have some activity. We're going to then regulate by adding some water. So it's not boiling again. And then we'll do this twice. We'll do it twice, and then the third time it comes up, it's ready. And so it's not time-based at all. These dumplings freeze really well. I haven't tested these wrappers, so I don't know how they hold up, but typically you can make a ton of them. So we can make a bunch of them, put it on this plate. We'll put them in the freezer, wait for them to freeze solid, and then we can throw them onto Ziploc bags, close it up, throw it back in the fridge. And then if you're cooking it from frozen, you don't want to defrost because then the skin will break. You'll get all watery. You would cook from frozen, and for the Chinese method, you would add that water for a third time. And then so by the 4th time it comes up to a boil, it's ready. For the fresh ones, I think around 8 minutes, which is the timer I set, is a pretty safe time, assuming the water is hot enough throughout. So if you're going with a timer, it might just be a case where once it starts getting up to temp, you drop the temp so it's not at a rolling boil, because then you risk breaking all of your dumplings. And of course, if you're really, really scared, you can temp one. You can easily take one out, cut it in half, take a look at the inside. We can do that in a bit, actually. We will take one out, cut it in half.
I wonder how many people that are watching are judging our kitchen right now.
And we can make a dipping sauce. Why not?
I feel like I should apologize to Gary and Scott. I thought you would speak favorably of your experience at the Grumpy Pig.
Oh, it is certainly favorable. It was an amazing experience. I don't know that my passion is making dumplings, though. You asked, well, I felt like your question was more about making dumplings.
Mm.
The Grumpy Pig was a very interesting experience. It was a kind of makeshift kitchen. It did not start out as a kitchen. So just in that regard, it is extremely ambitious. So here it's boiling again. I'm just going to add more water. Keep it on high. And we can talk dipping sauce. So for dipping sauce, basically I would go equal parts soy sauce and some sort of vinegar. In China, there is a black vinegar that's very common. Balsamic is quite similar. A little sugar. I like adding some chili oil. Just a touch of sesame oil. And if you want, you can add a little sesame seed on top. So let's see. Let me get a bowl. So if we're doing a really small quantity, obviously you can get a bigger container like one of these guys and make a big batch of it. But I guess we'll just make a tiny bit here. Go with a little sugar. Don't want it to be too sweet. Some soy, some vinegar. Just a touch of sesame.
This always reminds me when we go to those hot pot places and we have 20 oils and sauces and things, which is intimidating to me, but
My favorite part.
I just have you make a sauce for me.
That's it. You don't have to get too fancy. That's going to be a pretty good basic dumpling sauce. And if you look at our timer, we're at a minute and change left. We have added water twice. It is going to come up to a boil soon.
Do you need to stir the pot at all?
Not really. There is a chance some of these might have got caught on the bottom. So in this case, the floating test doesn't really work. In my experience, they will float prematurely, which means if you're just judging by the fact that they're floating, you're probably going to get some raw dumplings.
Not good.
So go by time, or if you want, go by the adding water method.
What if you wanted to use a stick thermometer? What temp do you think you would look for?
So for pork, at minimum, you're looking for it's a ground pork product. I would say 165 is good, honestly. With the water we added, my guess is most dumplings probably hit an internal temperature of 180, 185.
Got it.
All right, there goes our timer. Drop the heat for now. Let's see.
Why do you think a lot of the Asian dumplings are pork-based rather than beef-based or another protein?
Just availability. And pork is more affordable. All right, so there's a lot of veg, so it's kind of hard to tell, but it's definitely cooked through.
Could you temp one just for fun?
I don't even know if we have a calibrated thermometer at home. I don't rely on it almost ever.
It's somewhere, I remember.
I don't think it's accurate, though.
Yeah.
We just don't use it here. We have some at work. where it actually matters. So if you want to enjoy it hot, you would eat it now with the dipping sauce. You could also prepare the quick soup I talked about. Or, now that it's summertime, my favorite way is actually to refrigerate these. So if you can't get them all nice and separate, you can lightly oil it. You can use sesame oil. It's the flavor that makes the most sense. And then you can wait for it to cool down. And once it's cool, you can do a slightly different sauce. So now sesame oil is going to change the flavor a little bit. So we're going to pop this in the fridge.
Oh God, they're going to see how messy and packed our fridge is.
You don't have to film the inside of the fridge. Actually, let's go for speed. I'm going to go in the freezer. Not much better. So summertime, they do a dish in Shanghai, which is chilled dumplings. And sometimes it's literally refrigerated, chilled, very, very, very cold. Or sometimes it's simply room temperature. So they'll cook a bunch, just leave it out at room temperature. Probably won't fly over here in the US, but they do it in China. It just stays out all day. And when you order it, they're not piping hot. And it gets a slightly different sauce. I think usually it has either sesame paste or peanut butter. A little soy, some acidity, which can come from vinegar, or it can come from citrus like lime juice, chili oil, and cilantro. And it's kind of a creamy sauce. It gets dressed in it. It's very refreshing when it's hot outside. So I'm just gonna wash the cilantro real quick. Kind of clean up this table a little, and then we'll get the sauce together and try it that way. All right, so we kind of cleared the table a little, sanitized, and we're gonna build this sauce real quick. Super easy. We're gonna go with a little peanut butter. Again, you could probably also use tahini, sesame paste instead. They work in a very similar way. So a spoonful of peanut butter. It's quite thick. We're going to loosen it up with a little bit of our dumpling cooking water. We're not looking for a super sticky sauce. Just nice and creamy. Gonna hit it with a little soy. Some lime juice.
Could you use lemon if that's all you have?
Sure. Or again, you can also just use vinegar as well.
Okay. I've noticed with your sauces, you're not really measuring with teaspoons or tablespoons.
No, because you can just adjust it.
Yeah.
A little chili flake or chili oil.
I feel like that would be a really good sauce for noodles too.
Oh yeah, for a chilled noodle dish. And then cilantro, when you're going with a very small quantity, you can just tear it by hand. Obviously, if you're preparing a really large amount, you can chop it. And the dumplings go in. And remember, they already have sesame oil, which is why we don't need any sesame oil in the sauce.
Ooh, that looks so good.
So I don't like it super overdressed or anything, so you'll notice it's just enough sauce to lightly coat. And it has a lot of flavor. For those who really like it spicy, you can add more chili if you like, but that's the chilled version. That's it for today. You can make dumplings a number of ways. You can also use, like I said earlier, cabbage, like Napa cabbage, or you can use
mushrooms.
You can use mushrooms. You can do a mushroom and pork one. You can add shrimp. You can add shellfish. You can mix it up. You can do chicken, obviously, if you can't eat pork. So there's a lot of different ways you can make dumplings. And
you could add foie gras. You could add truffles. You could add lobster.
Well, those are just kind of silly. But let me know what kind of dumplings you enjoy. Let me know if you get to try this one out, what you think of it. And again, like if you like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
What's your outro?
I don't have an outro.
Oh, well, how about your outro is you just eat your food. Just eat it.
That's so weird.
People want to see if you like it. What do you think about it?
That's really good.
I'll have to eat it for a more objective view.